I'm going to depress you and then hopefully pick things up as we go along. So depending where you were born on this timeline, you are either exceedingly guilty of fouling the planet, and my generation, the baby boomers, can unfortunately not say we are the greatest generation by any means at all. And in fact, what have we done about that? I hope some of you have seen these climate stripes as one way to visualize how far out of kilter or off the reasonable path we are. So what have we done over the recent years? Well, this is the path of global warming, the path of global damages. And as you can see from this curve with the various meetings, and COP30 is going on right now, so the 30th such gathering, what I can say is, well, we've had a lot of meetings. And it is a sad story that we have done nowhere near enough to make things right. We have seen the damages, and unfortunately, my generation is definitely going to go down as probably the most selfish, the most short-sighted, and the children in the audience, you might be spending a great deal of time suing us. I would not blame you at all, because we've seen things like this, where, unfortunately, we seem to have made a lot of money for some already rich people, despite the fact that we could have been doing this so much differently. And so today I will try to be that scientist who no one gets listened to except if you all choose to listen as we move forward. So you could give lots of depressing talks about climate change and the climate disaster, but I'll simply say that if we look at a clear day in New York City, 2 days later, due to fires in Canada, we have the middle picture. And you can see from this slide that reality is worse than even the movie Blade Runner in 2049. So we are doing this poorly. And again, the scientist in the coal mine. So climate change, as bad as it could get, and it's going to be much worse. We are living it already. As Catherine Ajejo says, we are the enemy. We have discovered our lack of vision to take advantage of what innovation brings to us. But the other side of the story, and the one I hope you really leave here with today, is the fact that it is the richest fraction of humanity that are having the biggest negative impact. It doesn't mean we're all not responsible. It means that affluence, greed, and short-sightedness are so massively concentrated that the richest 10% of the planet use dramatically more energy and dramatically are more polluting than the bottom 50%. And so it is a horrific equation. As they say in Toto, we found the culprit, and it is us. And this environmental inequality injustice, I just left Oakland, California after 26 wonderful years at Berkeley. 1-digit difference in the postal code, 10 years difference in life expectancy. It's not just Oakland. Here's Washington, D.C., where I moved to. 20 years difference between the affluent, white, northwest suburbs and the other parts. So not all of that is climate, but that is inequality, injustice, inaccessible health care, et cetera. So we have doing it wrong. The United Nations went through a long effort to try to highlight how to do it right, developed 17 indicators, 169 subsectors, equitable access between boys and girls to education, food, energy, all of these things. These are goals for 2030. And you don't need to go into the details, but I hope some experts in the room have done more. The red shows those sustainable development goals: healthy planet, food, education, water, where we are making negative progress to a goal for 2030. So we are doing it wrong. So let me give you the bright side after hopefully really depressing you on a Sunday morning, and that is we have done a remarkable job on energy innovation despite all of the challenges that I'll get to in a second. You can forget the math unless you really like sort of dining on that early morning, but the so-called learning curve shows that as we double the amount of technologies we deploy, with a caveat, we see about a 20% drop in price year after year, decade after decade. When I went to grad school back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, solar was the most expensive. Now solar is the cheapest form of energy, no footnotes, no subsidies, no nothing. There's an equation, it's called a power law, we won't get into it today, and this has been dramatic. Solar and wind and now energy storage are now the cheapest forms of energy, not just those that are most sustainable, and yes, we have to worry about rare earths and things. And this is borne out. If we look at the growth rate, solar has improved in terms of performance and distribution faster than any other technology in energy history. That's a remarkable story given the fact that we currently subsidize fossil fuels about 5 times the amount that we invest in clean energy. Subsidy versus investment. These are not like, but it's a remarkable story. And if we look at what we have in terms of deployment, you can see with that purple and the yellow, solar and storage have just leaped ahead. In terms of the story, the battle, the tension between scientists and economists, and I am on the scientist side of this story, there's something called the duck curve, which I won't get into in detail. The duck curve is the demand for energy across the day. We have this thing called nighttime, where solar is not directly useful because night is a good thing. And you can see that energy demand, and this is for California, drops dramatically as we hollow out the back of the duck, as we add more and more local solar generation on homes and businesses and fields, so much so that California, now the world's 4th largest economy, has exported clean energy to its neighbors in part every day for the last 118 days. And so this duck, or the plesiosaur, as this artist highlights, is a story of the incredible technological improvement, but not the full improvement in terms of deploying this technology, largely because of that massive overinvestment of fossil fuels. We could be taking that excess energy, although that's the wrong term. You could plug in electric vehicles that have batteries bigger than any home needs. In fact, each EV's battery could probably power 3 to 5 homes, depending where you are. Or you could make green hydrogen, not gray, not blue, if you're into that, and there's some debate about that. And again, we're doing all this despite this remarkable pressure to keep fossil fuels in place. Now, this learning curve, or Moore's law as we call it, has dramatic behavior. We see this remarkable path for what solar has done, 90% drop in prices over 10 years, wind, 60% drop in prices, batteries, 90% in the last decade. Nuclear is a different story. We just did a huge study with a number of colleagues. The prices of nuclear is going the other way. So if it was a learning curve for these distributed clean energy technologies, nuclear so far is showing what I guess we'll have to call a forgetting curve, although it's more complicated. South Korea and China so far are showing low-cost nuclear compared to France and the US, 3 to 5 times more expensive. But we'll see. In California, putting that kind of story together highlights the degree to which California's goals for clean energy in 2010 was 20% powered. We made it 3 years late. California's goal for 2030 was 1/3. We made that 4 years early. The goal for 2030 was 50%. Now it is 60%. So a remarkable ramp up of energy, clean energy in the mix. And every place does it differently. China, New York State, investing also, counting or investing in nuclear and large hydro. California doesn't use either one in their mix. California says no nukes, no new nukes. That's under debate. We'll see where we go with that. Also no large hydro because of ecology. Very similar to what Germany is doing. And again, some remarkable progress in this regard. And I think the thing that's most exciting to me is that California's climate regulation includes in it a fixed minimum investment in energy justice, in investing in poor communities as well as rich communities, something that New York State, Massachusetts is working on, the Netherlands, making justice part of the story. Putting that together, what we see in places like California, again, 4th largest economy in the world, is this kind of remarkable picture. We're adding renewables, but now adding storage on the wings of that clean energy curve so that early morning, late at night, and hopefully all night eventually, we can get there. Meaning we have the storage so that we can make clean energy baseload 24/7. If I go a little further, the prices of energy have gone negative in the West, in the United States, have gone roughly to 0 at peak times in Texas, the East Coast. We're still working on that. But there are some interesting things going on. But again, the backdrop of all of this is that we have this huge challenge that it's very difficult to get a man, and I'll come back to that in a second, to understand something that their salary dictates they don't understand. And that's really the challenge. And those of you who followed Upton Sinclair, his run for higher office, his efforts ultimately became a movie. I hope some of you have seen Daniel Day-Lewis, and we lived in adjoining rooms down the university at the other end of Cambridge long ago. But this is an interesting effort. So if that's the case, let's ask a real innovator. Let's ask some people who have really made a difference in the environmental and sustainability field. And I'll turn from the story of these men to the story of women. So arguably the two greatest environmentalists, and I hope others you'll come up to me afterwards and say, oh, you left somebody out, but Rachel Carson, the most poetic, most eloquent view that if you don't invest in the planet, you're not investing in yourself, and Wangari Maathai, first African woman to win a Nobel Prize, transformed our thinking. There's others, but I would argue these are the 1 and 2, the 1 and 1A, the Gehring and Ruth of investing in the climate, and so that's N of 2. The other side of the story is how do we think about our future? And I would say part of the story of the future is the world of science fiction and thinking differently about the world to come. Mary Shelley, Frankenstein, and Lucille Ball, probably the two most important people in science fiction. Yes, there's Asimov, there's Heinlein, there's Arthur C. Clarke, but if the negative version of using energy to create a monster was the story in Frankenstein, Lucille Ball and Desilu Studios brought us Star Trek. And that's been the framework. That was what I grew up watching excessively. The story of clean energy going back to how we think about exploring, partnering, all manner of things. So that's N of 4 women leaders in this field. The technology evolution path is far from done. If we look at technologies like emerging wave generators that produce more energy per unit ocean area than even wind turbines, but you could put them together and get both out of the story. Clear solar panels, now there's windows. There's a whole range of technological evolution, but technology alone is not going to solve our problems. And so if I were to jump to a kind of where might we be at the end, I would say that the brave new world that my models and my analysis points to is a world where we are 70% powered by fusion, not fission, fusion in 2070, recognizing that fusion now works terrestrially. We've done it at Livermore. We think it's going to happen 2026 here in Commonwealth Fusion. There's ITER and others. But when I say 70% fusion, I mean half of that terrestrial power plants built between now and 2070. The other half of that, so 35% fusion, that's 93 million miles away, 150 million kilometers away, meaning solar power. So how do we translate that story to terrestrial advantages? We have to solve this justice issue. We have to solve the local environment as well as climate. So I'll conclude with just one highlight of this, a victim of the current US administration, an effort called HEDA, Health, Electrification, Telecommunications Alliance. And it's to take advantage of the small modular systems of energy systems. Who can catch a hard object? Right here. Who can catch another not so hard object to the kids? These are both examples of modularizing low-cost energy solutions, lights. We can do all kinds of things. In the map you see behind me here, we have a picture of all the health clinics in Africa, the dots, and the grid. We are not going to get there if we don't take advantage of these modular technologies to power health clinics with clean energy, but also to use them to nucleate mini-grids, microgrids, metro grids, town grids around the planet. And it's that story that I hope that you will join me and ask about and see how the technologies, the companies, the research you're doing can take part in the process to plan out clinics, to build clinics, to invest in the efforts to support them sustainably with these technologies that allow us to really integrate and win the story. But if you think, even at MIT, that technology will solve our social problems, you're off base. It's really about investing in the people at the end of the pipeline, those that do. And those of you who know your African geography know that maybe the most challenged city in Africa is Goma, currently managed by the M23 rebels. Here we have the largest mini-grid in Africa, and you can see how fluctuating the power was before solar and batteries were installed. It's been a remarkable transition, huge effort moving forward. And so I'll conclude with the reason I moved from the West Coast to the East Coast. It's to partner at Johns Hopkins to build a physical university in Africa, to invest in thematic programs around energy. 12 of the 20 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. and to invest in the blue or the marine economy, because 70% of the planet has been our dumping ground for centuries, and to invest in the mixture of land use, gender, and biodiversity to really lean into these areas of critical need. And so if I can just conclude, thank you for listening to a whirlwind tour of why I think we still have the options to do this right, to do this cleanly, and to do this in a just and inclusive way. So thank you so much. Thank you.